The perception about leadership at work is changing, according to the 2025 National Conversations in the Workplace study, which revealed 85% of today's American modern workforce believes that leaders ought to be held to a higher standard when it comes to communication and their preparation in the workforce today. The bottom line is this: in today's workforce, leadership is no longer just about strategy and authority. It's about clarity, emotional intelligence, and the ability to create trust amongst each other before pressure-filled moments arrive. Today, employees follow leaders who lead with intention, empathy, and authenticity. In today's conversation, I'm joined by my friend Sandy Gerber. She's an award-winning, certified communications coach, emotional intelligence trainer, keynote speaker, and best-selling author. She's also the host of the podcast, Magnetic Communications Podcast. With over 25 years of industry experience in helping leaders and organizations transform the way in which they communicate, she's become one of the leading voices on emotionally intelligent leadership and human connection. She's also the creator of Emotional Magnetism, which is a groundbreaking communications framework, which is now taught in academic programs, implemented as part of leadership development initiatives, and published in 3 languages. She also has an internationally acclaimed book entitled Emotional Magnetism, which has earned her 24 international awards. It also continues to help readers and organizational leaders deepen self-awareness, strengthen awareness, and communicate with more compassion and confidence. In this conversation, Sandy shares the deeply personal experience of rebuilding her life after 2 failed marriages, raising 2 kids on her own, and scaling Next Marketing Agency in her bedroom to one of British Columbia's top, fastest growing 100 companies. She explains how the same emotional intelligence and communication principles and priorities that shaped the turnaround in her personal life became the foundation of her professional success in high-pressure industries such as finance, construction, and technology. Throughout her career, she's worked with nationally recognized brands such as A&W Food Services of Canada, Molson Coors Beverage Company, TELUS, the British Columbia Lottery Corporation and Commission, Grand Marnier, Raymond James, and the St. John Ambulance Company, helping organizations improve engagement, collaboration, workplace culture, through emotionally intelligent communication strategies. And Gerber joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. But Sandy, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to
Yeah, for sure.
welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited and delighted to be with you to learn how you help organizations better communicate with clarity, my friend. It's great to see you, and happy Monday to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here, Kevin. If I can help your listeners with even just one tool to connect better, it's made my day.
Absolutely no. Sandy, I know that your work centers around the intersection of clearer communication and confidence, my friend. So tell me, how do you help organizations communicate with better clarity and confidence, my friend? What do you want me to know in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I take it from the point of view that I've been in the corporate world, but I've also been an entrepreneur and I've also been a team member. And so communication is something that most of us haven't been formally trained in, right? We just kind of pick it up from our homes, from our environments, and from our work experiences. And so I find that how I help leaders is through coaching, through training, through keynote speaking, and mostly simplifying communication and emotional intelligence so that we have a tool in our pocket that we can use when we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you say simplifying communication. That could be a broad term for anyone listening to this. So I'm wondering, what specifically do you mean by simplifying communication and making it more approachable for leaders to authentically communicate, my friend?
I think the biggest way to simplify our communication, I mean, it started with me knowing that I was failing at communication. That's the first place that we start. We don't really start working on our communication until either someone says we can't communicate well or we have some sort of failure. And so when I went through a process of being really successful in my business, but failing in my personal relationships, and that incongruency sent me on a path, like a decade, to learn everything I could about communication. And when I realized in that journey is that a lot of us haven't been given these tools. And if we've been given the training, it's not something that comes to mind quickly when we need it, when we're in an argument, when we've been activated. So, what I say about simplifying communication is to really think of it in three stages. First, being aware of your own self communication. How are you communicating to yourself? Because that's where everything starts. The communication and the conversation we're having with ourselves is the conversation we're having with everyone else. So, starting with that and putting some tools in place to make it easy for people. The second is really how are we expressing ourselves? And that's not just verbally, but non-verbally as well. A lot of us haven't learned body language, what I call connection cues. And so giving people some quick little tips that they can use in leadership as a team member, as a parent, as a friend, as a lover, any of those situations where they can use a quick connection cue. And the third is really looking at how are we engaging people, right? And that's where leadership really shines. You become more charismatic, you become more of a leader when you can communicate successfully. So, simplifying communication, we need to look at what are a few tools we can use right away to sound more, to connect better and have connected conversations.
Yeah, and Sandy, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because I'm someone who believes that effective communication and relationship building are interconnected, and I'm curious to ask you, how do you think building great relationships within the business or the the world of work can contribute to being a great communicator, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, we need to be able to express what we're thinking and we need to develop trust. That's how we become good leaders and being able to understand and listen to people. So, it really is all about emotional intelligence at the end of the day. It's looking at how do we notice, understand and manage our emotions and the emotions of others. So they're so connected, right? The way we communicate from, I call it the first and last. When we first wake up in the morning, Kevin, what's the first thought that pops into our head? Because that thought sets the trajectory for our day. So if we wake up and we're like, snooze, or thinking about our to-do list or, the problems from yesterday, that's with us throughout the day. But when we set an intentional first thought of the day, like I am competent, I am capable, I have everything I need to be successful today, that sets your path for the day. How you show up to your team, how you lead projects, how you complete the tasks for the day. So it really starts with that first thought. And the last thought of the day is just as important. Science tells us you take that last thought into your sleep, and your subconscious works on that as if it's real. So that last thought you put into your mind as well sets acts like bookends to your day. So when we think about communication and relationships, we have to start first with ourselves. What are we saying? What are we thinking? Being aware of our emotional intelligence, and then move forward in how we're expressing with people in an effective way.
Yeah, and Sandy, I know for you, you have a personal connection to this work, as you mentioned. You learned from your own personal failures, and now you're helping people do the same and avoid the communication mistakes that caused you to sort of have to start from scratch. I know you were divorced a couple of times, and you were even single mom at a certain point in your life. So tell me how you turned your own personal circumstances into your own business advantage, my friend.
Yeah, I mean it was such a journey, and I really feel like, Kevin, it's the reason I'm here on the planet, was to discover this information and then share it with people. I was, as I said, I was like successful. I looked successful, but I didn't feel successful. A lot of people can relate with that. And that incongruency was excruciating. I needed to figure out what I was doing wrong. Why was I not able to have a successful connection in my personal relationships, and ultimately some in my business relationships? What was I doing wrong? So I learned a whole bunch of tools, and I read everything I could put my hands on, fiction, nonfiction, research. And what I actually stumbled upon was this research from the 60s, and it was on emotional motivation. Now, I never heard of this. I thought it was interesting. I bought the book and I brought it home, and I was ready to just skim it. And I devoured the whole book because it was called The Magic Power of Emotional Appeal by Roy Garn. It was research that was done in the 60s on what truly emotionally motivates people. And they proved the emotional appeal theory, which said people are just motivated emotionally by four things. And if we understand what those four things are, what I call emotional magnets, then we can start crafting our messages to connect to them. And we have more empathy for people. So when I think about how I learned that, I was like, wow, Kevin, everything started to make sense in my life. Like why I made the choices I did in my personal and my professional life. People used to call me impatient or never satisfied. And what I realized was I'm actually emotionally motivated by achievement. And so there was things like that that kind of made a light bulb moment for me. And I started sharing that with people. Then I started using it in my business, and I started wondering, what are my clients or potential clients' emotional magnets, and how can I craft message to connect to those? I used that, and very shortly my business grew from the corner of my bedroom to a top 100 fastest growing company. So we knew that it was successful. But the real kicker was that I found out I used this information on my first date with my now hot husband of 12 years. and and it's not really the first date kind of banter, but I was like, done with the dating thing, and I just said to him, this is what you're signing up for, buddy. I'm motivated emotionally by achievement and experience. What about you? And we had this incredibly open, transparent, and authentic conversation, which we've honored for the last 12 years. So, this discovery that I found around emotional motivation has just blown up in the world. It's transformed my personal and professional relationships and success. And people were like, Sandy, what did you do there? Like, how did this work? You failed and now you're succeeding. What changed? So I wrote a book about it. And now readers are telling me it's saving their marriages, it's helping them sell more, it's helping them be better people. So it really was, out of this failure that I learned more about myself and was able to share that with the people in my life, and also with my teams, the people I lead, the clients I serve, and now globally with people in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, sadly, out of wanting to be open and transparent with you this morning. I want to share a personal story. So, sadly, as you know, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I found out at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life because of the severity of my disability. And I have a unique perspective on internal motivation because, without being internally motivated, society tells me that I just have to accept the government check and live my life, right? But
Yeah.
I believe that, everyone's portrait of success is different.
Hmm.
I believe that internal motivation or expectations is where it starts when we want to be internally motivated. And you believe that conversations or constructive conversations start from within. So I'm curious to get your own perspective on that theory and your perspective on internal motivation, my friend.
Yes, I mean, I think what you've done successfully, from what little I know about you, I'm inspired, Kevin, because you're listening to yourself and what you need and what you emotionally want out of this life and how you can serve people. So it's very similar to like the communication we're having with ourselves, the conversations we're having with ourselves is so profound on how it impacts our lives and the people in our relationships. Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario did a study and they found that on average, us humans, we have 6,200 thoughts a day. 6,200. And of those thoughts, 80% of them are negative, and 90% of those are repetitive. So if you think about that, we're all walking around with this negative mental playlist looping in our head. And we've got to get our communication through someone else's thought flow, this flow of looping content, so that we can actually connect. And so when you think about that, everybody's having an internal conversation at all times. And so we've got to look at, what are you saying to yourself? What's the track that you're putting in your head? What are you looping and focused on? Because that's actually manifesting in all of your relationships. So I truly feel that and I know from my own experience, the way I talk to myself, the way I think directly impacts my life. It's like Wayne Dyer said, right? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? It's all about how we see things from internal and then how we actually can manipulate and manage those things and connect with people with conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that as a professional speaker, you have a keynote that you've entitled "The Magnetic Leader," my friend, which is a live experience rather than a lecture. And I've attended speeches myself. The more interactive they are, the more information they absorb. Right? So
Yes.
I'm wondering if you could tell me about your keynote and how you authentically connect with the audiences, my friend. Tell me
Sure.
more.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing it. It's so much fun. I think, since I was a kid, I've been curious about words and how we can motivate people to learn and retain information. And, I was the kid, other kids said, "Hey, Sandy, what do I say to get my parents to say yes?" I've been crafting messages for a long time. So the keynote for me, I was tired of sitting in an audience and being spoke to. Like we're so used to getting content quickly that we can't sit there and retain that information. So I take my keynote and there's 5 segments in my keynote. So within an hour, each of those segments is an interactive piece. So sometimes I'll pull audience members up on stage and we'll actually go through a really fun scenario of listening and not listening while I teach them this really cool tool. I've done things where I start doing body language with the audience. So they are actually doing connection cues with me. So they're moving. I have people identify their emotional magnet and be able to do that on the spot so they can stand up, look around, and see who else is in the room. Like a whole bunch of really interactive pieces that also, right off the top, I make people laugh because the most important way to connect with someone is to make them feel at ease and to connect with them through laughter. So it's a really fun keynote. It's one that's been extremely successful. because people are yearning for this variance in learning.
And I have to tell you, life is better with laughter, isn't it?
It is so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Sandy, I wanted to ask you about women empowerment because I know that throughout the course of your career, you've been in boardrooms in industries such as technology, construction, and emotional intelligence as well. So I'm curious about leaning on your 25 years, what you've learned about the importance of women empowerment, building your own business, and knowing your own value proposition as both a speaker, a person, and a businesswoman, my friend. What are your thoughts on women empowerment as a whole, my friend?
Yeah, I'm an advocate for it. I'm very passionate about helping other women to succeed. I feel, I came from my own business. I was in large companies, and then I was in three male-dominated industries as an executive. And so I know what it's like to fight for your voice to be heard at the table. And I think we've grown in that way, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I think what I'm passionate about is lifting other women up. So giving them these tools, communication tools and programs that can help them feel more confident in a setting like that, where they're not having their voice heard, where they don't feel that they're being respected for their expertise. And so it's very important to me. I often will donate many of my keynotes in a year to women empowerment organizations so that they can hear these lessons and use these tools. I've had people walk out of my keynotes and workshops saying for the first time in 40 years, they have a tool that they can use to feel more confident in a room, which is just amazing. So I think we have a ways to go here, Kevin. We really do. But the best way is to pay it forward. I had women that empowered me and men, but I had women that empowered me, and I'll never forget that. And so I always do that for others as well. And I think bringing the community together. I have a program I call Speak Brave, and often a lot of women will sit back and not voice their opinion for fear of not landing it well. And so that Speak Brave program is really about how can you connect with yourself first in your relationships and potentially to an audience in a more effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for me, Sandy, my internal fire as a speaker comes because out of my own experience, when I graduated college, I wanted to be a sports reporter, and I graduated with a sports journalism degree, and I went on 10 consecutive job interviews out of college, and no one would hire me because at the time they viewed my disability as a liability. So I turned my story into a speaking business, and now I talk to organizations about the importance of hiring folks with disabilities. And I know that there's a growing conversation, especially in Canada, about amplifying the hiring of folks with disabilities. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how we can get leaders to rethink hiring folks with disabilities as a competitive advantage rather than a liability. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I think that we've got a ways to go there. We really do. And I think, with the world the way it is, inclusion is so important more than ever. So I think it's important for leaders to understand that with AI and the advancements of technology, human connection is going to matter more than anything. That's going to be our competitive advantage. And so having a company that is inclusive, that opens up their team to people that have disabilities is something that's going to be normal in the future. It should be. It's just another human being coming on the team, providing their expertise. So I want us to get to that place. I think there's tremendous amount of work that still needs to be done there, but I know Canada is behind that and making sure that we're making some strides. I think that my own experience working with people that are, you've got a dynamic team, you've got people that are bringing different things to the table. It just makes your team stronger. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the first things I tell audiences as a speaker when I talk about the importance of organizational diversity is that their people are the best asset they'll ever have. I always tell audiences that your people are your most important asset. And, so many organizations are worried about their key performance metrics and meeting a certain target, but if they don't value their people and their emotional intelligence and their own contributions, I call it rowing in the same boat as an organization. Because if you invest the people that you're in charge of leading in the overall outcomes and you provide them autonomy, they're much more willing and probably able to give their best performance at work. So I'm curious, how do you think we can combine emotional intelligence along with emotional readiness to work in terms of listening to the people that we're in charge of leading as organizational leaders? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you're thinking, how do we bring emotional intelligence into our listening as leaders? Is that what you mean?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, I think, emotional intelligence, it starts by modeling that behavior first and getting some formal training in it. A lot of people don't have this information and they don't know how to do this. So really making sure that we're self-aware is the number one step. Making sure that our relationships, our listening skills, whether they're in a personal or professional setting, they really need to be tuned up. And there's little tricks and tips that you can use to help you be more successful there. So I think this is, what is it? Forbes says emotional intelligence is going to be the number one skill in the future. And I think, as I've seen already, and I've been interviewed on this for AI's impact on humans, our connection and our communication is going to be our number one skill. And so regardless of where you are in an organization, your emotional intelligence and your communication skills are your biggest asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy, when I talk to the leaders, one of the first things they tell me is that I'm used to doing something a certain way, and it's hard for me to retrain my brain to do what I've always done. But I always tell people that embracing innovation is the fastest way to, first of all, reduce the amount of workload on your plate, and that you don't always have to pour all of your intellectual energy into something if you're willing to delegate, my friend, from a leadership or an emotional standpoint as a leader. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of delegation and trust inside of an organization. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
It's absolutely essential to delegate. It is, because it forms trust, right? You have to be able to give people that autonomy so that they can try things and sometimes fail. And then how you respond to that matters more than just even giving them the task itself. I also think one thing that's critical is curiosity. And I know you're a fan of that as well, Kevin. I think everything succeeds better with more curiosity. So as a leader, always thinking, how can I be a better leader? How can I help my team to elevate? How can I get them to be more engaged? Those are all elements of curiosity. And when you start asking those questions, you start looking for the answers. And the answers are in how you're leading others. If you are having trouble getting your team engaged, you need to look at, well, what is it that you're putting in place right now to boost that engagement? How are you communicating with your team on a regular basis? And I'm not just talking about stand-up huddles. I'm actually talking about looking at the person across from you as a human being and showing interest in their life. Asking them, it's no different than in your personal relationships. We don't just all of a sudden become disengaged. We drift in our personal and our professional relationships. And when we're drifting, it's because we haven't put that energy and effort into remaining curious and caring about the people in our lives. So I'd say, as leaders, whenever I'm training my leaders, I'm always starting with, when is the last time you were curious about your team member? Like, not just saying, how was your day or how was your weekend? Saying stuff like, what surprised you about the weekend? And being open and actively listening to that person so that connection can get even stronger. It's being a basic human being and really caring about the people in your life and not taking them for granted. So when we look at delegation, if you don't have that foundation in place and you're delegating or not delegating because there's a trust issue there, we've got to get deeper. We've got to understand what's beneath that. Are you afraid that it has to do with your value, your worth? Are you afraid there's some self limiting belief that people won't do it as perfectly as you? So it always comes back to what's the track that's going on in your mind as a leader, and what can you do to shift that so you can establish more trust with your team?
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy, I want to talk to you about unlocking potential as a leader and building off your last answer in terms of giving your staff the confidence that you have to exhibit as a leader in terms of trust from a communication standpoint. How do you think we can better communicate that we trust the people that we're in charge of leading and helping them to unlock their own potential from a communication standpoint? What do you think leaders need to know about effectively communicating about potential inside their employees? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
It always comes down to first how they're responding to people. So I always say, there's a tool I use called the EQ switch, and I train people in this. It's backed in neuroscience. It's a 3-step tool that helps you to respond instead of react. So when we're looking at elevating people's potential, you need to model that behavior first, right? People want to be behind and around a leader that inspires them and helps them grow. So this EQ switch is a tool that I train people in who are wanting to elevate in their positions or want to be better, more effective leaders. The first step is to, let's say you got activated or irritated by something. The first step is to locate that feeling in your body. So where is that emotion sitting in your body? And we do that because emotion shows up in our body before it shows up in our mind. So that makes you present, right? Ooh, something's irritated me, something's set me off. Where is that in my body? The second step is to name that feelings, to know what that emotion is that you're feeling. And this is what's backed by neuroscience. UCLA Dr. Matthew Lieberman, he calls it affect labeling. And he proved that when you name your emotion, your amygdala, your brain's panic button, that activity reduces by 50%. So what happens is you're actually calming your body down just by naming your emotion. And the third thing that you need to do is take a breath. Now, you're not going to break into a box breath or any big breath because that would be weird, but you could take a 7-second breath. So 3 seconds in through your nose quietly, 4 seconds out through your mouth. And that gives you a gap to choose the words you want to say. And then you can respond in an emotionally intelligent way. When you look at most leaders we admire and the people who we aspire to be like, they pause before they speak. They think about the response and they don't react immediately. They're coming from a place of intention, not impulse. So the way to help elevate people and bring up their potential first is by modeling emotional intelligence, modeling how to behave in a situation in a corporate environment, and then training others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy, I wanted to congratulate you because I know that you've been named one of the world's top communication professionals, and you've authored a book that's given you more than 20 awards, my friend. So I'm curious about when you speak to leaders about authentically communicating, what's the difference between authentically and passively communicating only to get a goal accomplished or a metric met, my friend? How do you think we can go from passive to authentic communication?
Yes, happy to. Thank you for your congratulatory messages too. It was super exciting when I got those that news. So how do we help people to be more authentic is the question I get asked every time I speak. And as I said, it really has to do with what you're saying to yourself first, because we all have these kind of walls up in front of us, right? Around us, we have we have developed our identity and how we think about ourselves and how we deliver our content in early days, right? Someone in your life, any of your listeners, someone in their life said something about them when they were really young, and that became their identity. And from that identity, they've been carrying it for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And so for them to be authentic, they go back to that pattern. They go back there and they think, oh, well, I was told I was this, so this is who I am. They're living in someone else's identity. And so what we need to do to be authentic is identify who we truly are. What is it that makes us excited about our day? What is it that are our natural gifts? Where are people saying that we're truly shining? And then jump on top of that and start boosting that in your own life. There's some real freedom that comes from just being yourself and accepting that not everyone's going to like you. Some of your listeners have already checked out because they're like, no, I don't need this information. But there are listeners that are listening to us right now that need this information and want to put the work in. So to be authentic, it takes some work. It takes courage. It takes curiosity. And once you do it a few times, it's so full of freedom. You just feel like you can be who you were supposed to be on purpose and understand what you emotionally need to be happy. See, when I found out those emotional magnets, it changed my life because instead of people labeling me a certain way, I labeled myself and I know how I show up. And so when I shared that with people in my life and who I worked with and who I led, it just created even more room for authenticity for them to show up as themselves as well. So again, it has to do with modeling that experience and just being real. We're so sick of the stuff that we're getting online and all this content that's coming to us. It's the true authentic people that are shining.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said a couple of years ago, I delivered the keynote address for the state of Oklahoma and their intellectual disability conference, hiring folks with disabilities. And my key message to the leaders in the room, no matter what segment of the governmental sort of employment rung they were on, was that they were the cornerstones to transformational change. And the idea behind the message was for the leaders to know that they're empowered to make a difference within the positions that they have been given. I'm curious, how do you think leaders can maximize their level of difference if they're really looking to make transformational change?
Well, to make transformational change, you have to model that behavior. And you also, I think it has to do with, I've been in startups, I've been in large corporations, and I've had my own business. And I found that the leaders that succeed the best are the ones that bring you along the journey, right? You're a part of something that's going to make a difference. And now the people that are working today, we're yearning for meaning. We're really yearning for meaning. We want to be on a team and led by a leader where we're actually making a transformation in this world. And so when we think about that difference in transformation, it has to do with the leader being not just, the mission statement on the wall or the values that we have as a business, but truly emulating that mission and living that mission and getting out of their office and connecting with the teams and reinforcing their goals for the organization so that everybody, it's like you're all together collectively working towards that goal. So transformation truly only happens when it's authentic, when people are rallied around a vision that motivates them and inspires them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got 4 quick questions left for you. And the first of those 4 questions is this. I know that you've been in the speaking game for a while, so I'm curious, what do you think makes an effective speaker in terms of a value proposition and authentically connecting with an audience? What do you think has made you an effective speaker, and how important is that value proposition, my friend?
I know what's made me a good speaker is the effort and investment I've made in training. Like that's the first piece. Everybody's kind of getting up and thinking they can be a speaker. I went to heroic training in the States, and it was an elite speaker group, and it was, I was just so blown away with the techniques and tactics you can use to really connect with your audience. And that taught me one major learning, and that was the shift between delivering your message and actually transforming the audience with your message. And so the difference here is that people get up and talk to an audience. And instead of that, it's really about connecting with the audience so that they feel they are relating with what you're saying. So many people will sit down and write their speech and they'll think about what they need to say, but they're not thinking about what does the audience need to hear? What do they need to transform? And so that's a big change. The other part of being a speaker that I learned is to be yourself. Like to really, I get people that say, Sandy, I love your energy. I love how you make fun of yourself. I love how you share your personal stories that are extremely relatable. I love how interactive it is. I love how you are silly up there and having fun, you know? So it makes it an enjoyable experience. They learn by feeling the experience, not being told the experience, you know? So it's a big difference. And I think lastly, it's always refining. It's your speech is never done. It's always refining what worked, what could be enhanced, what could take it to a whole new level. So it's a constant work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy, just because I'm curious and we're both Canadian, every time I talk to somebody on this podcast that is Canadian, I always ask them, what's the best part about being Canadian? How do you show your Canadian pride, my friend?
Oh, I feel like it's a gift that I was born here. I love Canada so much, not only just because of its natural beauty, the people are phenomenal. I think we model what good human beings are in the world, and I think we have the values that we don't take things for granted. We're open, we're inclusive, we're embracing, we're curious, we're kind, we're polite, we are friendly. So all those things, matter. I just love being Canadian. It is a true privilege. I travel all over the world to speak, but I'll tell you the best part of traveling is coming home to Canada.
There's no place like home, right? Yeah, and Sandy, I'm curious to get your thoughts on your podcast, which you've absolutely named the Magnetic Communications Podcast, which helps people better communicate, as we've talked about, in under 10 minutes a week, my friend. So tell me about your podcast and what makes it so fabulous, my friend.
Yes, I mean, this started as just kind of a fun thing to give to my clients. I wanted to, as again, simplify communication. So that means giving something in a short amount of time that people can use immediately. So I made it a micro podcast, if you will, 10 minutes every episode, every Tuesday. I was just notified it won the 2026 Women's Podcasters Awards for Best Mindset and Mental Health. So yeah, thank you. It was a true delight, and it was a voter voting. So that's the listeners. Thank you, listeners, for finding it of value. So it's a great podcast in the sense that its purpose is, as I said, to give you a tool every week and something you can take home and use in your personal or your professional life. And there's a range of subjects that I talk about. Really, I get comments from the listeners, and then I start doing an episode based on what they want. I do a whole bunch on body language. People are fascinated with that. I do a lot of information on emotional intelligence. And then again, I've been spending time recently because a lot of people are talking about the struggles they're having in their relationships. So I do, just this week, I'm doing one on drift and how that's happening and impacting people's relationships. So it's such a fun it makes me stay focused on delivering value in a short amount of time. It's not easy to do, but I love it.
Well, as a journalist who used to work in a newsroom, I know the value about conserving and maximizing time, right?
That's right. That's totally right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sandy, my final question for you this morning has to do with your own personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
Yeah, I found I'm driven by experience and achievement, two of the emotional magnets, and because of that, it's very important to me what happens with my legacy. I've been told now that my book, it's in 3 languages, it's won lots of awards. That to me is a part of my legacy that I'm leaving. So long after I'm gone, someone will pick up that book and it will help them in their personal and professional relationships. I think the legacy I'm leaving, and I know people have told me, is that I've helped them to connect better with themselves, with people in their relationships, and even with audiences. So I find that, I truly, every day is a gift, Kevin, because I feel like I have delivered that and I continue to deliver it. And it's an absolute joy to help and to be in service to others.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that your legacy is built not by how many headlines you're behind, but how many people you're willing to help when the cameras go away, right? So,
Right, totally, totally.
absolutely. And Sandy, if I want to tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh, I'd love them to connect. They can find me at sandygerber.com. I have a whole bunch of resources there. And I also, my book, Emotional Magnetism, the podcast, Magnetic Communication. Or you can also, if you're a listener that's finding you're drifting in your relationship and it's starting to cause concern, I have a quiz that can help you to understand what that gap is and some free tools. So you can go to sandygerber.com/drift quiz. And it's just quick, under 10 questions, and it will help you out. So enjoy.
Fabulous. Well, Sandy, this was certainly an energetic and thought-provoking way to start my week. I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me today and for all the hard work you do to help organizations better communicate with clarity. My friend, it was a delight to meet you, and I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for reaching out to me and connecting. And thank you for our thought provoking conversation. I love what you're doing and your commitment to help people lead with success. Thank you so much.